How's it going, everybody? Cory Robin here. Just getting things started today. We are going to talk about the VINES Ranch Airstrip. But first, before we do, I wanted to talk to you about our sponsor for today's video. This is FLY-LITE aircraft lighting. They're really cool. They actually have a little LED light. They come with just primer, so you can paint it to your custom aircraft color. This is an inspection plate cover. Very, very, very cool. Go to fly-lite.com and purchase yours there. Thank you very much for your generous sponsorship of this video. Let's get right into it, shall we? We've got a lot of awesome story here for you today. Now, VINES Airstrip is one of my favorite airstrips in all of Idaho. It is located right next to all the other airstrips that we've talked about so far. It's considered one of the Big Creek Four, and one of my favorite places to land at because it's so iconic, so beautiful. It's right on the river, so you can really enjoy nature and check it all out. It's absolutely amazing. Dance. Let me introduce you to everybody who's watching. There's a whole bunch of people watching. This is exciting. We got Will. We got, oh, my son Riley is watching again. How's it going, Riley? Love you, buddy. Quest 2 Wells in northern Michigan. John Highfield. John is a member. If you click on the little join button below, it'll give you a little information on how you can become a member too, just like John. Thank you for your support, John. Sure appreciate it. Also, we got another member on board whose name is Crammy Davis Jr. He's also a moderator of our live stream chat. So thanks, Crammy, for moderating the live stream chat. Let's talk about VINES Ranch. Here is a picture from the book. That is VINES Ranch. Very cool story here. Here we go. Let's jump right into it. In March 1914, Arthur E. Garden and his wife, Viola, homesteaded 160 acres at the location. At this time, the place was known as the Garden Ranch. For several years during their ownership, Viola served as the area's postmistress for the Clover Post Office. The official post office was run from their home located on the north side of the Big Creek. Also in the country, and if you remember, VINES is actually, if I remember right, it's on the south side of the creek, so they'd have to figure out how to get across the creek back in 1914. Also in the country were their nephews known as the Elliott brothers. These brothers were associated with the property on Monumental Creek and at the Mile High Ranch, where the Clover Post Office was eventually moved. In 1918, Arthur Garden became quite ill after getting caught in fall storms while moving stock from Old Meadows, Idaho to Big Creek. He returned to Old Meadows for treatment, wet and sick, where there he died in the hotel. Gosh, that's really sad. John VINES. After Garden's death, his wife sold the property to E.I. and Mary Osborne, who sold it in October 1942 to Art and Margaret Francis. Nearly 2 years later, in September 1944, John VINES purchased the land. VINES, a veteran World War I pilot and later a test pilot for Lockheed Martin, was forced out of flying when he developed a heart condition. At the closing of his career in aviation, he and his wife opened a string of successful restaurants called Top Hat Bar and Grill in San Francisco and Sacramento, California. VINES and his wife had a falling out and he moved to Idaho, where he remained for roughly 30 years. He came to the property with very little and lived in the cabin once occupied by Richie on the south side of Big Creek. It had not been used for years and VINES did very little to improve it. It had a dirt floor, stove, bed, and a cramped sitting area. He did build all of his own furniture, and some of the pieces made of willow were quite unique. During one of his early winters in the Big Creek country, VINES needed to leave, so he hired upstream neighbor Dewey Moore to care for his horses. When he returned months later to trail his animals back down to his ranch, he found that Moore had taken his money and nearly starved the horses. The two hardly ever saw eye to eye or rarely spoke again. VINES used to tell visitors, "Old Dewey tried to tell the truth once and nearly choked to death." He couldn't do it. VINES lived a modest life on Big Creek. and was adored by his backcountry neighbors, except more, of course. He always had an entertaining story to tell, and if it was after 5 o'clock, he insisted on pouring himself, along with his guests, a glass of Big Creek Lowball, which was mainly straight Grandad whiskey purchased by the case. Beyond a good story and an evening cocktail, Vines had his regular daily and seasonal routines: hunting, fishing, walking, and chopping wood. He did not believe in keeping a wood pile, which seems odd considering he lived on the dark south side of the river, where even on a clear day in the dead of winter, the sun did not shine. When people asked about this peculiarity, he explained that it kept him healthy and gave him something to do every morning. Besides, Vines would explain, a man's got to cut wood every day in this country anyway. If he doesn't, he's gonna die. Sounds cool. I like Vines already. Vines continually had interesting and hilarious stories to tell visitors as they passed through. One year, he had a series of pesky bears who kept getting into his dishwasher, which was nothing more than an old bathtub that he piped flowing water into from a nearby ditch. He seemed to think that storing the dishes in the running water kept them sanitary. One of the bears liked what remained on the dishes and continually made a mess, but Vines could never catch the critter in action. Vines became irritated and baited the bear in with meat and attached to a contraption of cans. When the cans rattled, he planned on shooting the bear. However, his scheme went awry when the bear sat down in front of his door to eat the meat, and he could not get out. Here's some pictures of good old John Vines. Right here. There's a picture of him sitting at his chair that he made. You remember? Here he is crossing the river with a raft made out of wood, and he's pulling a rope across. So he strung a rope across the river, and that's how they got across back then, I guess. That's pretty cool. Here's a picture of PA-12, it looks like, landing at the Airstrip in Vines. That's a pretty cool shot. November 2577 Mike. I wonder if that airplane's still flying today. That'd be kind of cool. Why don't one of you guys jump on the Googles and see if 2577 Mike is still flying. It's a PA-12. It was owned by Johnson Flying Service. Pretty cool. Sometime in the early 1960s, downstream neighbor Lauren Hollenbeek bladed in the runway. It's believed the piece of heavy equipment was walked up Big Creek when it was frozen thick with ice during the winter. When the job was finished, the D8 Caterpillar was walked back the same way to Cabin Creek. Vines enjoyed the new Airstrip as it gave him direct mail service instead of having to walk down to Cabin Creek. He also was able to bring in specialty items that he could not receive before. Vines began ordering 55-gallon wooden barrels of raw peanuts. At certain times of the year, the floor of his little log cabin was ankle deep in peanut shells. At one point, Vines lived off peanuts after he unfortunately leaned over the wood stove and his false teeth fell out and burned up. Unable to chew any tough foods anymore, he ground up peanuts until he could get another set of teeth. This guy's a hard, stone-cold killer. Besides barrels of peanuts, Vines brought in other things via Johnson Flying Service. This included a small Sears tractor lawnmower and matching trailer. He used the piece of equipment originally to move supplies between the strip and various parts of his property. But later it was outfitted with a small 4-foot blade to help maintain the rocky surface of the runway. When the plane could not land on his airstrip due to certain weather conditions, the mail was dropped off at Cabin Creek. Vines then had to cross the river using his homemade cable car and travel the river trail downstream. Now you saw the cable car. It's a bunch of logs strapped together. Oh. He would often use one of his horses, but if they were out grazing and not close by, he'd simply walk, pushing a wheelbarrow that he kept on the trail side of the river. He could then return without having to carry anything. In the late 1960s, as Vines became older and less mobile, He began to think about selling the ranch. The higher-ups in the Forest Service wanted Big Creek District Ranger Earl Dodds, who had a good relationship with Vines, to discuss a possible sale. Dodds was not thrilled about the task, as the Forest Service wanted to pay Vines practically nothing. That's typical. On a spring day, Dodds rode on the mail route with Johnson Flying Service pilot Bill Doris. The two were greeted and invited inside for a chat. Along with his mail, Vines had placed his usual order of raw peanuts and Olympia beer. Dodds put the offer right out there and was in many ways very apologetic. Vines understood his position but could not accept such a low offer. As if nothing happened, the three continued on in conversation, eating peanuts. Dodds and Doris drank coffee, and Vines opened a can of beer. He was someone they both admired and respected. About the same time, offers for the property were coming in. He was busy trying to finish a new log cabin with a loft. The new place sat above the original cabin. It was rumored that the project, Vines and his hired hand got into a disagreement while nailing down the shingles on the roof. The helper apparently threw a hammer at Vines and started yelling. Vines went down to his old cabin and returned with a gun, which sent the guy running, and he never came back. Oh man, what a crotchety old kook. Vines was awesome. In 1969, the property eventually sold to Idaho cattle operator Barry Bettis and partner Mike Yeager. Yeager, who lived in California, ended up using the property annually with his family. I don't know if it's Jaeger. It's probably Jaeger. Jager. I'm gonna go with Jaeger. After several years of ownership, he arrived in McCall trying to charter a flight with Johnson Flying Service, but was told their business in the region would soon be winding down and they no longer had the equipment or pilots to fly to the Strip. Jaeger then asked what had happened to former Johnson pilot Bill Doris, as he had flown them in many times. The person told Jaeger that Doris had retired. Surprised by the information, he looked Doris up in the telephone book and gave him a call. Doris told Jaeger that he was far from retiring and was actually starting his own air taxi operation. Jaeger hired him. In fact, Jaeger turned out to be a major backer for Doris's charter company, McCall Air Taxi. Doris's newly started company, which consisted of a Cessna 170, an old office trailer, and a gas truck, quickly grew to have a new hangar, a new Cessna 185, and many leased aircraft. Doris, a World War II Marine pilot from Roundup, Montana, loved aviation, and in the spring of 1956 came to McCall to work for the Idaho Fish and Game Department. While working for the department, he came up with the idea of using his personally owned Cessna 170 for work to save time and money when he needed to reach remote management areas. By 1965, he became a professional pilot again, working for Johnson Flying Service in McCall. When Johnson began the first of several failed buyouts, Doris became uneasy. In 1976, he started McCall Air Taxi. Several years after establishing the company, thanks to his own skills and Jaeger's financial help, Doris brought in several pilots, including Rod Nilsson, Bruce Minter, and Andy Anderson. That's kind of a handy name. Your name is Andy Anderson. Eventually, 3 of his 5 sons joined the business, starting with Mike, who established an arm of the operation in 1979 at the Stanley Airport. Sons George and Pat soon followed. Mike bought Wilderness Air, owned by the Combs family in Salmon, and for a short time called the business McCall and Wilderness Air. As the business picked up steam, Bill slowly retired. He died in March 2000 after suffering from a stroke. At the height of Mike's ownership and management, he had seasonal highs of 25 employees and 15 aircraft before selling it in 2002 to Dan and Laura Scott, who renamed it McCall Aviation. Mike worked several years for the company and then, like his father, went out on his own when he bought Sawtooth Flying Service. As before, Mike brought in family to help during the busy parts of the year. That's a pretty cool story. Usually, Yeager flew his family from California to McCall in his Beechcraft Bonanza. While in McCall, the Jaegers planned a series of shuttles with the Dorises from Big Creek Ranger Station to the property as they left the Bonanza at the station. Jaeger, an accomplished pilot in his own right, flew the same Bonanza around the world with his wife Margie, and a friend. I need to learn how to read. Jaeger spent 10 years enjoying the place and the surrounding wilderness area. When he and his family first started spending time on the property, Vines was still living in the small cabin and provided many memorable stories. During their ownership, they made few changes, mainly enjoying it as a spectacular place to camp, hike, and fish. Jaeger's son Bill lived at the ranch one summer and took on several projects, such as pouring a concrete floor in the newer cabin, reviving an old vegetable garden, improving the water system. The upper log cabin was never finished, and they used it as a place to sleep, while the lower richly built cabin was used more for storage. The only improvements made to the airstrip were an occasional leveling using the Vines tractor. Jaeger commented, "The darn runway actually grew rocks. Every year with the freezing and thawing action, we accumulated more and more rocks." Another issue with the runway during their years at the ranch was a rather tall tree off the downstream end of the field. Bill Doris used to hint to Jaeger that it needed to be removed, but it was on Forest Service land. It only made the approach for takeoff and landings a little more technical. This tree, along with a few others that were mighty tall, later burned in a forest fire. In the end, the Forest Service purchased the property in 1979. The Jaegers have revisited their old place a handful of times, and on occasion Mike and Margie have flown over it on their many travels. The remaining buildings burned in a 2000 wildfire. The airstrip is still used by some, and like others in the Big Creek drainage, has come under the threat of closure. So Vines is a beautiful strip. Like I said at the beginning of the story, Vines is one of my favorite places to land because of it's just right there on the river. It's absolutely gorgeous, beautiful place, and that's a great story. The character and the ruggedness of these people to live out in these remote locations by themselves, essentially. I mean, Vines himself was there by himself, kind of got old, and the whole deal. One more time, I want to thank the sponsor of this video, FLY-LITE. Like I said before, it's a really cool LED lighting system for your aircraft that just basically fits over a traditional inspection cover. It comes complete and ready to paint with the primer on it. It takes this version. I don't know if they have multiple versions or not, but this version takes 3 AA batteries, which it does come with. And so that's pretty amazing. And you can follow them on Instagram at FLY-LITE.LED, and you can go to FLY-LITE.com. Let me show you the card. Oh, come on. Oh, the lighting. Oh, there we go. So there's the card. Hopefully you can see that. Awesome. Well, thank you very much for the FLY-LITE and for sponsoring this video, you guys. That's pretty awesome of you. Let's go into the live chat and I'll answer your questions. This is the question and answer part of the video, of the live stream. And so now I will read your comments. I'll scroll back just a couple of minutes, but go and ask any questions. It can be about any of the stories in the book, or you can give suggestions as to your favorite Idaho strip I should talk about, or any strip in the country. Or if you have a good story you want me to tell my audience, I would be absolutely happy to tell it. Send that to me in a private message. My email address is conveniently located on my page channel in the About section. So let's go ahead into the comments. You're feeling dyslexic? Oh, is it because it's showing up in reverse on the live stream? Oh, I'm sorry about that. Let's see. Story time. Jason Page, my son. China Dude 07 says I have a soothing storytelling voice. Well, thank you. Did you just touch my face? Oh, I have that bad habit. But you know what I've got? I keep my handy dandy hand sanitizer. Oh yeah. Don't spray your face. Yeah, that was really terrible. My beard is looking thick. Yeah, you know, we're going on 2 weeks now of laziness, pure unadulterated laziness. I've gotten a lot of messages, believe it or not, about the beard. I didn't know it was such a big point of conversation, but pretty interesting. So Patrick Murphy looked up that aircraft and it still has a valid registration in Alaska. That is awesome. Hopefully it's still flying. That's pretty cool. Murray Christiansen is asking about the time that I crashed my wildebeest. I'm going to actually address that in a future video, so I don't necessarily want to do it here. Plus, it's a really long story, and I don't have the time to tell it right now. Maybe I'll just do it live. I'll show some pictures and do it live. What do you guys think? Then I can do interactive question and answer. My son is asking, oh, Brian, I'm so glad you bought the book. Now, for those of you that don't know, we really should support Richard Holm. I think this book is available on the Idaho Department of Aeronautics site, and just Google it. It's called Bound for the Backcountry. It's by Richard H. Holm Jr. He did such a fantastic job on this book, and one of the reasons why I wanted to read from it is to give him support. He's still around. He's an awesome guy. I've actually listened to him talk live at a meeting up there in Idaho at Johnson Creek, and just a really great guy. It's a fantastic book, and I would highly recommend you go on Amazon or wherever it's available and purchase it. Like I said, it's Bound for the Backcountry. This is the hardcover. I don't know if they have softcover editions, but Richard H. Holm Jr. is the author, and that's what we read out of today. So thanks for bringing that up. I appreciate it. I'm glad you bought the book and support our backcountry enthusiasts and authors and everybody who puts out great content, even on the written page. So that's really fantastic. My favorite story in the series, I don't know. That one was pretty good. I really enjoyed one of my favorite strip, the absolute all-time favorite strip, is Dewey Moore, and I did not know that Dewey Moore was a crotchety, lying sack of pus, and Vines didn't like him because of that. That's interesting to hear that perspective. And so this one is probably my favorite out of the ones that I've read so far. If you want to listen to some of the other stories that I've read, feel free to, there's a playlist that I've created called Story Time, and you can see all the live feeds and all the stories there. Have I been to Newport, Oregon? I'm not sure that I've been to Newport, Oregon or not. Where approximately in the state is that? I'll give you a few minutes. Corey, we use carb cleaner, multi-uses. to hand sanitize, you use carb cleaner? Really? What's in there? It's probably just like a denatured alcohol-based cleaner, right? Murray, I will talk about the Wilger crash, but not in this video. I appreciate your curiosity. I'll be candid with you. It's still a sore subject for me. Whenever you wreck an airplane, it sucks. And it's a big bruise to the ego. Okay, so Tyrus Newman, and that's what I have planned now. He says that I actually prefer you make a video detailing your wildebeest crash over a live telling of it, which is probably really good, because then I can do a little bit more with it and that kind of thing. So, alrighty, well, there's not a lot going on in the chat. I sure appreciate there's 57, 58, 59, 64 people watching. It's kind of hopping up and down. Thanks so much for watching. Please support, Acme, the guys who make my shocks. If you need shocks for your airplane, please consider Acme shocks in your purchase decision. There's a lot of options out there. Everybody's making shocks these days. There's two really good shock manufacturers, and I just happen to run Acme because they are awesome people, and they're lightweight. They're the lightest on the market for that caliber of shock. They're a low aerodynamic profile. Even though we fly slow airplanes, aerodynamics is still important. But they're a really good high-performance shock to protect your airframe. So please consider giving them some support as well. Thanks again for watching. And we will see you on the next one. I'm going to play you out with some beautiful country music from artlist.io, who does all my music on my channel, which is pretty awesome. So.
When you're away, do I miss you? Is it just because I can't kiss you? Is it dishes in the sink?
Have a good day, everybody. Stay safe, stay clean, stay 6 feet away, social isolation. Most importantly, love you. Thanks for all your support and for watching. Have a good one.
I ran with you through our high school halls. You're the prettiest girl there.
I don't know how to end these things.
Annie,
Forgive me.
darling, you're